Hi everyone, and thanks for being with us on another one of our series on working with the department. This conversation I'm going to have with you today is one which sits with me deeply because as a social worker, I believe that my profession should offer a range of services to people that are designed to enhance their lives, to not diminish them, not to denigrate people, but to make their lives more functional, make their lives better. But what we experience with social workers within the Department of Child Protection or Child Protection generally is not necessarily that. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that all social workers are the same. We're not. Clearly I'm different. Clearly a lot of people that work within the department have different views as well. But the reality is that we have a standard which we all must abide by, that is important for all of us as social workers, so that we function in ways which are in accordance with a set of principles and values which we all should share. The problem we have is that many of the people working within the department don't understand those values. Many of them, in fact most of them, don't even belong to the Australian Association of Social Workers, who set the code and those values. So I wanted to discuss with you what those values are, because it's important for you to understand that if you've encountered the child protection system, that the people that you're working with have a set of standards, have a set of values that they're expected to adhere to, that are to ensure that you have the best possible outcome that you can. Now, the Australian Association of Social Workers has a code of ethics. It is important for all of us who practice social work to understand what is in those code of ethics. It is also important for you, the user of the system, to understand what it is that you should be getting from the service provided by a social worker. Imagine, for example, if you went to see your doctor and your doctor was rude, disruptive, didn't do what that doctor said they were going to do, misdiagnosed you, caused you to have extreme pain and suffering and perhaps maybe even death. And your family would then find a way to take that particular doctor to the AMA and possibly have them sued. Or you could sue them for malpractice if they misdiagnosed you, or they didn't provide the service that they are supposed to, according to their own code of ethics. The same applies for social workers. Now, in South Australia here, we are attempting to have social workers registered. It has been passed, but it seems to be taking some time in order to get that to be officially integrated into the system. But it doesn't mean that because social workers aren't registered, that there isn't a standard that you should expect from them. So within the Code of Ethics presented by the Australian Association of Social Workers in 2020, it outlines some key elements that I think we should know in order to better understand what the service is that you should be receiving and how that service should be delivered. And it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that the requirements of social workers are adhered to, are upheld, and are provided to you, the consumer. So I'm going to read out some of these, a couple of key issues around social work, and I want you to think about your engagement with the department and whether or not you believe that this service has been offered to you in the way that it is explained in the ASW's Code of Ethics. So the first thing we need to think about is, who are we? And this is what the Code of Ethics says. Social workers enhance their individual and collective well-being and social development, resolve personal and interpersonal problems, improve and to facilitate engagement with the broader society, address systemic barriers to full recognition and participation, protect the vulnerable from oppression and abuse. And I think that last one is really important for us to acknowledge. In what way have you been vulnerable? Now, if you're experiencing issues around domestic violence, mental well-being, you've had issues in your life that have presented dysfunction of some description, then clearly you're one of those vulnerable people. If you come from a place of poverty, then you're also a vulnerable person. If you're uneducated, then clearly you're also a vulnerable person. There's a whole lot of areas which will determine how vulnerable you actually are. But our job as social workers is to protect the vulnerable and from oppression and abuse. So where you experience oppressive behaviours or an oppressive system, such as the child protection system, then you could make an objection to that. If you discover that the social worker you're working with isn't following through on their determination or their code of ethics in relation to protecting you against the oppression and abuse that you're experiencing. Now, there is a definition of social work which I think is important. I'm just going to point this out for you as well. Social work is a practice-based profession and an academic discipline that promotes social change and development, social cohesion, and the empowerment and liberation of people. Principles of social justice, human rights, collective responsibility, and respect for diversities are central to social work. Underpinned by theories of social work, social sciences, humanities, and Indigenous knowledge, social work engages people and structures to address life challenges and enhances well-being. Social work is designed to help you to improve your life, not to diminish it. And that is important, and that is a primary definition as to what social work is supposed to do. But really, what do we do? I'd like to read this to you also from the Australian Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics. Action to address the personal difficulties of service users through casework, counselling, clinical intervention, work with individuals, families, partnerships, communities and groups. It is the task, it is the challenge of all social workers to address personal difficulties that you might have, whatever those personal difficulties are, through casework, organising people that could come and also work with you around those issues. Counselling is another one, which most social workers within the department wouldn't have any idea about anyway. Clinical intervention, which does include counselling and other things that we might find appropriate, including referrals to other organisations, and working with individuals, of course, and families and the community. So you need to think about what is the degree to which your social worker, if you're working with the department, has actually spent some time working with you, and what benefit has come about as a result of that. Has it been helpful? If it hasn't been helpful, then that particular social worker hasn't met the requirements under the Code of Ethics. It is also incumbent upon social workers to raising awareness of structure and systemic inequities, promoting policies and practices that achieve a fair allocation of social resources, which clearly they do not do because there never seems to be enough money. They always seem to be overworked and they lack resources to get the job done in the first place. Acting to bring about social and systemic change to reduce social barriers, inequity and injustice. And we need to focus on that word injustice, because most of the people that we deal with here at the Child Protection Party will argue that the way they have been treated has been totally unjust. Now, finally, I would like to go to an area which I think is really important, and this is what we in social work call respect of persons, which is one of the key principles of social work. Now, respect, so this is about how we approach individuals how we as social workers see you and how we would therefore work with you. And this is what the Code of Ethics says. Respects the inherent dignity, worth and autonomy of every person. Respects the human rights of individuals and groups. Provides humane service, mindful of fulfilling duty of care and duty to avoid doing harm to others. Fosters individual well-being, autonomy, justice, and personal and social responsibility, with due consideration for the rights of others. Recognises and respects group identity, interdependence, reciprocity, and the collective needs of particular communities. Now, you can underline whichever one of those you like as to whether that's been effective in your experience working with social workers. But the one I like is respect of human rights of individuals and groups. And the one before that was respect the inherent dignity, worth and autonomy of every person. So the decision-making process within the social work structure should be about respecting your view, listening to what you have to say, and giving you some autonomy in the decision-making process. Now, finally, how do the social workers go about making decisions? There's a whole section on this within the Code of Ethics, but I'll just read you the key elements here. Having comprehensive and as relevant information as possible on the matter about which a decision is being made. Now, I want you to think about that in terms of notifications, the way the department approaches you, the way they identify whatever those issues are that have come to them through notifications, and the impact that they have on you. So having comprehensive and as relevant information. So relevant is really about how well they got to know you, how they've investigated, how they've forensically looked at who you are and where you come from, and the impact that your life, the consequences, I guess, of the experiences that you've had, how they've impacted your life, and that should impact the types of decisions that they made, if they truly understand you. Observing appropriate confidentiality and duty of care requirements, that goes without saying. Identifying the risks and benefits to each of the parties affected by the decision. Now, this is where within social work and the child protection system in particular, this becomes problematic. Primarily because at the end of the day, and this is not an issue which I would personally disagree with, but at the end of the day, really this is about protecting the well-being of children. But there is a balance. There is a balance between making a decision that's looking after the well-being of kids and your ability to be able to change whatever it is that you need to change in your life so that you're better able to look after the children in your care. So identifying the risks and benefits to each of the parties. So that's something where the child protection system fails dramatically, because they don't, if they looked at the way you could potentially improve your life so that your children could be better cared for, then that would be looking at the risks and benefits. The benefit to the children is they could stay with their parents, and the benefits to you is that you could improve whatever the issues are that came to the department in the first place. Documentation, documenting the issues considered in the decision-making process and outcomes. And they do a lot of that, but they don't do it in a way which is necessarily, as you know, always accurate. So I hope that some of these ideas which I've presented to you in terms of the way social workers should present, there are many others. I'll put a link in this video for you to have a look at the actual Code of Ethics if you care to download it. But I guess my issue is that if you have a better understanding as to the service that you should be receiving and you're not receiving it, then it is incumbent upon you to make a complaint and perhaps even to cite those things within this Code of Ethics that would indicate the type of service that you should expect to get but are not receiving. The problem that we have is that not many people really understand what social workers are supposed to do. Social workers themselves don't understand, in fact, on many occasions, what it is that they're supposed to do. But we need to remind them continually what is their ethical obligation, how they should be respecting you, and what we should expect from them as a result. Thanks for being with me. I hope you've gained something from this video. There will be more to come.